Welcome back to Eyes Wide Open. I'm Loz, your host, and today we're honoured to have David Fleming, founder of Not Our Future, Covid19 Assembly, and Together Declaration. He's joining us to talk about his new project, which draws from the amazing success of his info war in Oxford to push back against 15-minute cities. David unveils a strategic blueprint to unite the freedom movement's diverse voices into an unstoppable force of people-powered politics. Inspired by history's lessons, he emphasizes the transformative power of unity and a shared goal: mobilizing non-voters. Fleming's message is clear: encouraging these non-voters to cast their ballots can be the game changer we've been seeking. But that's not all. Mark your calendars for Sunday, 27th of August at 7 p.m. Because if you want to continue this conversation, David will be live for an exclusive Q&A, and I'll be right there alongside him. This interactive event is a great opportunity to dive deeper into his insights, address your burning questions, or inquire how to get involved. The Q&A is exclusively for paying members of my website, so don't miss out on a chance to be a part of this thought-provoking conversation that could shape the future of the freedom movement. Links in the description below, but now it's time for our guest. David Fleming, welcome to Eyes Wide Open. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Lawrence. Thanks for inviting me.
Great. Yeah, you made it up here. How I found you was... my good friend, Havoye Morich, the host of Geopolitics and Empire. He's also on TNT Radio. I asked him if he could recommend any guests, specifically for 15-minute cities. And he said, first name he came to was David Fleming. I know you're working with Not Our Future at the moment, but tell us a little bit about the other projects that you've been involved in that have, brought you to the tip of the public discourse in relation to the freedom movement that we're involved in.
Yeah, well, when it all kicked off, I started off a couple of weeks, or maybe a month in. Toby Young set up Lockdown Skeptics, and I thought, I'll do something similar, but not the same. So I set up a thing called Lockdown Truth. So I wanted to make graphics that would, go viral, that kind of thing. So that was one, and then that had limited scope. So then I set up Covid19 Assembly, which we did a number of projects on, and that sort of led me to the group that became Together, so the Together Declaration, and I did that for a while. But I had my eyes on bigger things. I sort of looked at all these things as stepping stones to the actual battlefield with the cabal. That's why I took I set up Not Our Future, which was, I see a step above Together. Yeah. And so that's what I'm on at the moment. But so my eyes always on the next thing. Yeah. Yeah. So although it was simple, my stuff stood out, and people thought it looked professional, so I must be controlled opposition.
Right, okay.
That's too slick.
You're not anyone in this game until you've been called controlled opposition. Yeah. It's almost like a rite of passage and a badge of honor in itself.
Because you look at a lot of websites that came out on our side, or leaflets, or things, and they're just like terrible design.
Yeah.
So if you look professional compared to that, then you're controlled opposition. But then the thing is, it's a bit silly, isn't it? Because if the government or whoever wanted to infiltrate you, they would
do crap ones.
Crap one, yeah, basically.
Yeah. So they're the real controlled opposition, the crap ones, though. It's easy to call everyone a shill. It's really easy to do because you're not taking a chance. It's like a cynical, negative position to take. It's far harder to take a chance on somebody. It's far harder to, and riskier to stake, your support for some people who are out there on the front line. It's easy to just go, oh, everyone's a shill. I guess, you've come across a few of those yourself, being so deeply embedded in these movements that you've been involved with over the last 3 years.
As soon as you do anything to stick your head above the parapet, there's various levels, you'll always get haters.
Yeah.
So that's just normal. So you'll always get haters, whether they're government controlled or not, is irrelevant. Or I'd never heard it before, but then it came up like the grifting, that one. Because with Covid19 Assembly, we did projects, and our first big project was the COVID deaths audit, which it was a big plan, a big. I still want to finish it and do it properly. Literally, the idea was on paper to open up, because there were 120,000 deaths of COVID, with or of at that stage. And let's face it, all the COVID thing was all about people being afraid to die. So every single death was important because it was creating our prison, basically. So with Claire Craig, we were going to do our best to look into every death and find out what really happened in every one of those cases that were presented to us as a reason for destroying humanity, practically, was those deaths. So okay, we're gonna look at them all, But basically, the amount of emails we got all about Claire Craig, they're just calling her a grifter. But the thing is, they were so coordinated, and they all followed a format. And they were mostly all funny, It was quite witty, stuff. It was like a campaign, sort of literally a military campaign, and we know it's the 77th
Brigade. Yeah.
It was.
I can't see them being very funny though.
No, they were almost all 100% funny. They were literally. It was quite enjoyable to read, almost, if you could just dissociate yourself. But that was that sort of people calling you out and saying you're a grifter and you're this and the other. And then later on, there's the people actually calling you controlled opposition, which is sort of almost the reverse. We were starting to build up a picture. Claire Craig put together a team of pathologists, and we had a statistician on board who ultimately it didn't work out.
But was the objective of the project to determine the actual number of people that died during that period? Not so much of COVID, but actual deaths, to see if there was a spike in deaths during that period. Is that what the objective was?
Well, anybody presented as a COVID death, we wanted to say if they were or not. And obviously we were suspecting that they weren't. So we just wanted to put that in a format and present it to the public.
Because I always thought that was probably because there was so much propaganda, there was so much lying with statistics, because people, are susceptible to graphs with numbers and they roll them out on a daily basis. It was so difficult to try and get to the bottom of it. So I just took the position, well, I just don't believe anything the government is saying. That was my position. But I always thought one way to be able to truly determine whether this was, once in a generation pandemic was excess deaths. Because if there was no excess deaths, how could they determine, it was a pandemic? So I always thought that would be a good metric to actually be able to determine whether it was true or not.
Denny Rancourt has sort of done a lot of work in that and shown that,
Madazalam and Matt Hancock and all that stuff.
Procedural policies, we could say.
Yeah.
And obviously all the people who were ill right there and then who added to that spike, it was just condensed because they were all very ill and they probably would have died over the next 6 months anyway.
They needed the numbers, didn't they, to push the pandemic? Yeah.
So that's why but no real excess deaths. But there was the spike because they made it happen in a shorter space of time. It beggars belief,
Was it something that you'd like to get back to then, that project?
Definitely. I mean, obviously, my longer term project over the next coming up, that would be one part of it, a genuine inquiry. Like, obviously, the inquiry that's happening at the moment is just a joke. I
haven't really followed it much because I know it's going to be.
I know, but sometimes I can't help hearing bits and pieces, especially when you can see they were setting it up as oh no, we have to go harder and faster next time. For the next pandemic. It's definitely going to happen.
When I heard they were having the inquiry, and one of the requirements from the people running the inquiry was that you can wear a mask and you can have a COVID test before you come in. Well, there you go. No. That's telling us, the right people are being placed in the right position to run that inquiry. I think that kind of touches a little bit upon what we're going to talk about later, is that the problem we've got is our institutions. Things like, running public inquiries are so compromised, so infiltrated, so corrupt that we don't really put much faith in them being able to come up with any truth or justice. Is that something that you feel is a problem that we're facing right now as a nation?
Well, yeah. Well, it's just, everything's controlled, and that's just another part of it. I didn't for 1 second think there'd be a real inquiry. I was talking to Toby Young about it 3 years ago. He wanted to do an inquiry, so did I, but he was trying to keep it sort of official. He wanted to get the backing of like a university or somebody
mainstream.
Whereas I thought, no, let's just make it from the people.
Yeah.
the inquiry I want to have in the future won't just be COVID, it'll be an everything inquiry. So that'll just be part of it. It won't be the COVID inquiry, it'll be the inquiry, like the Inquisition, cover everything. And COVID's just a tiny part of the whole thing.
Well, it is a tiny part of the whole thing. It's like a precursor to what they've got planned and what's coming. And that's how I found you, was by asking Havoye about, have you got anyone that knows about 15-minute cities? And I've just done a live stream about 15-minute cities, a 2-hour live stream, and it required me to do quite a bit of research into the whole idea. It's quite a dystopian prospect, 15-minute cities, but it's part of a bigger agenda, which is the 2030 agenda, and you have all of these spokes that are coming from it, and COVID was like one of the key setups for that, to put the infrastructure in place, to get people used to this idea of QR codes and all of the other factors. And I found a clip by Rebel News, which was the protest in Oxford. Once Oxford came out first and said, we're going to be the trial, and there was immediate pushback, and there was this really well-run protest in Oxford. And I only found out when we spoke earlier that you run that. Tell us a bit about your experience being kind of thrust into the 15-minute city struggle and Oxford.
Well, we launched Not Our Future at the end of November last year, and the whole idea of Not Our Future was sort of a number of steps. The first one was to create information like good leaflets and things, and then just get volunteers to deliver these leaflets on various topics, ideally to every house in the country, regularly. I mean, in an ideal world, it'd be every house would get a leaflet every week on a different topic, in and around all this freedom stuff, COVID, lockdowns, or, 15-minute cities or CBDCs, whatever, any of those things. But just after we launched, Oxfordshire Council announced they were going to bring in this traffic zoning into Oxford City, which would effectively make it 15-minute cities, whatever they wanted to say. In fact, they were calling them 15-minute cities when they first announced it, and they were saying it was for the environment. Whereas later on, when the shit hit the fan, they were backtracking and calling it traffic calming and traffic measures. But when they announced it, they were all pleased as punch.
Well, I did a bit of research and put 15-minute cities, and then all of the cities in UK. Right, so I did Salford, 15-minute cities, Edinburgh, 15-minute cities, Leeds, 15-minute cities, and almost every city, without fail, says, "Yeah, we're going to do it. We're going to do it." And some of it was old announcements. So, like you said, before the shit hit the fan, before people started actually researching this, is that they were quite happy to talk about it as a 15-minute city.
Yeah, because before November, December, other people had mentioned them in the past, but so Oxfordshire announced it, and there was a quick flurry of activity. Like, some people got nasty, and some people gave death threats to councillors and things. So, that was obviously wasn't clever. But there was a flurry of activity on Twitter, and I thought it'd be a great way to show what Not Our Future is all about.
Yeah.
If we leafleted the whole of Oxford City in one day with the truth about what 15-minute cities are. So I said, okay, let's do it. I worked out quickly what it would take, and I thought, we'll need about 400 people, 300 people to turn up to do it. And I thought that's a lot of people. It's not much people for a protest, but it's a lot of people to do a job, But I decided to go for it because that's what I do. I always just go for things. Yeah, I know I'm stupid, So I decided to go for it. So I announced, I sat down, I made a graphic, stuck it out there. Yeah, obviously I got a lot of people saying that, great. Got all the usual suspects to share it, and it started taking off.
You were telling me before about you were weighing leaflets.
I'd never done this before. I didn't have time to start meeting people to teach me how to do it, so I invented it myself. So I just made maps of every single ward in Oxford City.
Did you make your own 15-minute zones for the leaflet drop?
Yeah. And then broke that down roughly myself. And then I literally, the day before, a van pulled up outside my house, and the guy dropped a pallet outside my front door it was half a ton of leaflets. It was literally a half ton of leaflets. I put them all inside my house. So I weighed how many 200 were, and it was like a kilo or something like that, 2 kilos. So on the day, we had trestle tables and weighing scales, and everybody got like a kilo of leaflets.
Of truth, kilo of truth.
Yeah, and so that was about 250 leaflets or something. I think a kilo and a half was everybody got a plastic bag with their leaflets, and 400 people turned up, and it was a really successful day.
Well, it was a big success because it was a massive raised a massive amount of awareness to the situation.
Well, there's a number of things. First of all, that amount of people turned up from all over the country, and it was it was like a sign saying, it's not just Oxford. The whole country's coming to help Oxford. Yeah. It was like a movement, literally.
The Rebel News interviewed a few people from the day. The Freds was one, but there was some other people they spoke to that were really good, really articulate, understood the problem, had no problem, describing it. And I thought there's quite a lot of talented people there.
Yeah, well, these were all people who'd taken a decision to drive to Oxford from all over the country. They were doing it for a reason. They weren't mindless idiots, so they knew what they're doing.
What was the reaction like on the street?
Generally, I mean, there wasn't a huge amount of public interaction because we were just putting them indoors.
It was very new at the time, wasn't it? This whole idea of 15-minute cities. It was like a bit of a breakthrough in the public discourse, I think.
Well, yeah, especially because we just put truth bombs in every house in Oxford, so nobody can say they don't know it. Don't know about it. But I mean, generally, the brief was doors. Stick it in the letterbox, and that's it. We're not talking to people. We're not trying to convert people here today. It's not a protest. We're not trying to convert people. We don't want to have arguments with anybody. Generally, the feedback was good. I mean, nobody said they were accosted by anybody.
What has been the effect in Oxford? So from that first step, which was raising awareness through education, truth bombs through the door, like you said, has Oxford backpedaled at all? Is it, softening its tone? Have there been any further protests or leaflet drops?
The next month there was an actual protest. Yeah.
How did that go? Do you know? Did you attend?
I did go for, I just sat and had a coffee with the Freds for the whole time. There was a by-election for the council in March, I think. So 2 months before the actual local elections. But there were no local elections this year in Oxford anyway, so that wasn't an issue. But in the by-election for the local council, the independent candidate nearly won, but Labour won instead. But Labour sent 80 canvassers out to one ward, people on the street.
Hammered it.
Yeah. The independent candidate who was against the zones and the Labour were like both on about 800 seats, votes, and everybody else was nowhere, like 10, 100 or 50, that. So they nearly did it, but that was with Labour having 80 candidates. Now, if I'd known, I could maybe have asked all my volunteers from before to maybe come out one more time to do this election. That could have swung it. But either way, between the two events, the protests and then the election, I think that got the message over to other places. And Canterbury announced in the aftermath of Oxford, before the shit hit the fan for them, Canterbury says, "Oh, we're doing that too, yeah." But the thing is, Oxford were bringing it in straight away, whereas Canterbury's plan was literally a 20-year plan. So it was miles. They haven't even built the ring roads yet. Aren't even any plans that are going to be part of the plan. But the leader of the council was a Tory, and he was all for it. So obviously he wanted to try and get some of the attention now, have some of that virtue signal and stuff going on. And I just wanted to get them out. So I set up this thing in May, called Hold Our Vote, which was about...
Hold Our Vote?
Yeah, which was about getting together.
And this was to challenge the Canterbury Council?
Well, I was going to do Canterbury and Bath, but the idea was there that we would sort of all agree to not vote for anybody until a candidate came up that we said, yeah, let's vote for them. My plan was, get rid of the councillors in Canterbury, particularly the leader who was behind this plan. But we didn't need to, because...
You've reversed the decision, haven't you?
Well, no, he didn't get voted in. He lost his seat in May, right, okay. So he's gone. Yeah. So that's good. And they've reversed the decision as well. And lots of other places are too.
Well, it could have been a catalyst, couldn't it? Because
that's the thing,
when I was doing the research for my live stream on 15-minute cities, it was clear that amongst the people globally who are resisting, and there's some there's some powerful figures out there. Even Jordan Peterson speaking out against it, and you have Christine Anderson, which is the German MEP, and she's fantastic. She's really, really good. Epoch Times, and there's lots of kind of influential people that are in positions of well known, right? And they are talking about this issue quite openly and prominently, and that was one of the things that came up, as Oxford was such a big event, because it was almost like 15-minute cities came onto the world stage through this announcement that Oxford Council had made, and then you had the other ones that began to follow. So I think your leaflet drop also became part of the global news, because it was the first time that people said, actually, you're not just going to get away with this. We're not just going to roll over. We've experienced what we experienced in COVID, and COVID is a bit different because they were saying we're all going to die from this deadly disease, but this doesn't have the same fear impact as COVID did. Okay, they're saying climate change is going to be the reason that they're going to lock us up in our towns and our homes this time, climate lockdowns. So I don't think it's going to be as easy, but I think what you did in Oxford reverberated around the world in terms of this awareness that people are coming to with this digital gulags that they are trying to impose on us. And it seems that the pushback already, even at this stage, is beginning to have a ripple effect, because like you said, Canterbury has reversed their decision. Now, they've either reversed their decision because central governments have told them, or they're getting nervous because this has to be implemented on a local level. And it's the councillors who live amongst us. They're not in some ivory tower in Westminster, or even more so like billionaires in a different country. They have to live in our own community. So they're feeling the heat, I guess.
Yeah, well, the thing is, before Oxford, to make an announcement about like this was a virtue signaling thing. It was like, we're great.
There was no comeback, really, was there?
Well, they didn't think there was a comeback. They just thought, we're great, aren't we?
Yeah.
This makes us look good. So before Oxford, it was like an announcement like this makes everybody think, oh yeah, my job's even safer now than it was before. People think I'm better than I was before. Then once Oxford turned into like a cesspit, nobody wants to do that. So if you announce there's going to be a 15-minute city in your city, that means your job's going to be less safe. You're going to be less popular because...
Right, Fred said it coming. Right,
said Fred coming. Turning up. There's a queue of 400 people outside leafleting it.
But that's good, because that...
It becomes a liability then.
Because then it becomes a much more difficult decision-making process, because up until now, there's been no resistance. We'll do whatever we want. What are the people going to do? Nothing.
Yeah, so that's the thing. I would say if I work, because I've worked for councils for the last 30-odd years.
Okay.
Yeah, so I know councils. It's like my whole life has been working towards this, everything I've done.
What did you do in the councils?
Environmental health officer.
Okay.
So, I worked in public health, pollution, air pollution in Barnet.
So you've seen all the devastating effects of climate change, have you, from first
Well, in Barnet, I ran the council's clean air program, which was funded by Boris Johnson when he was the mayor, so that was my baby, so I know how they work.
So you've got a unique advantage in this, haven't you, taking on local council, because if you've been behind the curtain, you understand the processes that are in place that make them work and operate.
Well, I know, just roughly speaking, that now to bring in something like a 15-minute city is a hot potato. They don't want to do it, so they're just going to wait now. They're not going to do it themselves. They're going to wait for the government to tell them to do it, or so they've no choice. It's not their decision.
Yeah.
Or the government are going to do it, and then.
Well, that's what happened in Liverpool during COVID. Is that Joe Anderson, one of the most corrupt local politicians in Liverpool's history, which is saying something, right? As he implemented Tier 3 lockdown. If you remember, do you remember Tier 3? That was when they really pushed it. We're really going to push it, Tier 3. And that's what motivated us to, hit the streets, was Tier 3. But he used the central government as the reason for doing it. He said, I can't stop the central government telling me. So, they will fall back on that if necessary.
That's what will happen. Because before it was like a virtue signal thing. Whereas now it's a bad thing. So they'll just wait for the government to force it through some other way. Yeah. So, it's not gone away. It's just changed. It's like everything.
But it's good though, isn't it? It's good that we're forcing them to change their plans and their tactics.
Yeah, and not just that. We're learning how to do it.
Yeah.
And if something works, we do it more. Whereas like we're together, some people don't agree, but arguably, because I was there, I was doing it every day. We were starting to get more and more MPs signing our declaration. Like Graham Brady signed it. Lots of people were signing it.
What were they signing to?
Signing our declaration, which was we will not accept vaccine mandates. Basically, or passports in any way, that kind of thing. It's all
digital ID.
Well, we didn't go that far. We were just on vaccine mandates and passports.
So you were getting some good momentum on that. Some influential people were coming on board the declaration.
So much so that, and I know this because I know because with Together we had an advisor who was a very high level conservative, like fixer, and she knew a thing or two, and basically it all because the NHS. So we had our thing going, vaccine passports, mandates, and get momentum. And then the NHS, the 100,000 sort of got going. The 100,000 people who were against, I forget exactly, it sort of joined forces. And then the key thing then was that Lord Frost resigned on the Saturday. Boris Johnson was going to announce a Christmas lockdown on the Monday. Mm-hmm. And then Lord Frost resigned on the Saturday, and that basically precipitated that Boris couldn't make the announcement, and lockdowns were cancelled, and basically COVID mandates were cancelled, and basically COVID disappeared. And then
I remember how quick it just fell apart.
And then it was completely erased when the Ukraine thing happened. Yeah. Because if there was any doubt, then
they just transitioned. The propaganda just moved seamlessly.
There's that Bob Moran cartoon where once the COVID's going off stage, like the guys are pulling Ukraine on.
It was incredible to see that, though. It really was, because if you were red-pilled to what was happening, then you could see it in real time. Go, wow, are they really doing that? But
but the key thing is that the person in the Tory party told me. The reason Frost resigned was because COVID and lockdowns and everything had now become a leadership issue. Obviously, we've had two prime ministers since, so it obviously did. But the reason he resigned was because at that point, right there and then, anybody who wanted to be a future prime minister, turns out it wasn't, but felt that they had to be on the opposite side now on COVID, so they had to distance themselves from COVID, or later on they couldn't, lead. So that's why Frost resigned, and that's sort of why everything sort of folded.
But I think it also goes to show that we can actually be effective, because that's that
was my point. I got into that.
The thing that they want us to think, right, is that we are just little people and we don't have any voice really. We don't have any influence. Is that they want us demoralised so we don't push back. But the reality is when you do push back, even on a small scale, like 400 people in Oxford, can actually put the whole 15-minute plan on ice.
Technically, it's arguable if we did, but...
Well, I'm going to say you did.
Okay, well, say the whole point of all that was to get sort of digital ID and CBDCs and all that, and net, social credit, basically. So we stopped that. They thought they might get it instantly that way. So they're not. They have to go around the other way. I mean, I've also been interested in the last 20 years in startups, Silicon Valley startups and stuff, and how people come up with an idea for a business or service, and how they get that to customers using it is a complicated process. You have to get people to use your product, and sometimes the metaphor is like a quarterback in American football. Is sometimes you have to go a crazy path that you're just making up as you go, and you don't know where you're going to be in 3 seconds time, all over the place, and sometimes going backwards to go forwards, and then you get there and you score your touchdown.
But at the same metaphor, the defence can also block the path of the quarterback, so they can't make the play. Right? Yeah. They run out of space, they run out of time, or whatever.
Exactly, it may be. But so they're sort of doing their roundabout thing to try and get the same effect. But
they won't give up, that's for sure. But neither should we.
But at least it buys us some time.
Definitely.
And the same with the 50-minute city. So I'm there sort of dead in the water now in that format. So that's bought us a bit of time.
Because I think that's the thing, isn't it? Is that CBDCs, 15-minute cities, digital ID, all of these dystopian, tyrannical technologies that they're trying to bring into, into our world can only really do so under the cover of darkness. Because if people really knew what they were, they would be up in arms and resist. And I think that's what it is. It's an informational war. It's trying to get the word out to enough people in order to create enough resistance that they can't just rush it through. They can't just sneak it in at the dead of night. They have to be fully reveal them and then face the electorate.
Yeah, well, that's why. I mean, the first thing I did was that lockdown truth. I was trying to get things to go viral because I wanted information to get out there. Then I set up Covid-19 Assembly. The reason I used the word assembly was because I wanted it to become the centre of people sort of coming in to get together and work together to get information out.
Alex Jones nailed it with his brand, InfoWars. That's what it is. Informational warfare.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it is all about information. And I don't like using the word media anymore for that stuff because it's literally propaganda. It's a propaganda machine. I mean, if you look at, whoever it is who's in charge, who wants to influence us, basically they use what we call the media as just a propaganda arm. It's all that's exactly what it is. They want something to happen. They use their propaganda machine to convince us that, we let them do it.
So that's one of like an early red pill for people when they become aware of what's actually going on, is that they realize that the media is a centralized, controlled arm of this billionaire oligarch class that are trying to influence events from a supranational level above and beyond a national interest, and that the media is just one big controlled arm. There is no difference in them. There's like 4 companies that own all the media in the world kind of thing. And when they want to disseminate a message, they can do so through all organs of media almost simultaneously, that they're all speaking the same message at the same time. They're all walking in lockstep, which makes it difficult for the public if they're not aware that the media is controlled. They think that this is happening in real time, and it's true. It's difficult for people to break the programming because it's coming from all angles at the same time. It's completely enveloped. Tell us about how have you ended up on the front line of the freedom movement. What was your transition? Because COVID was a double-edged sword in some ways for them, because the amount of people that are now awake to the corruption in the UK at the very least, which, at first is demoralizing to realize how deeply corrupt the country is, and how the power is slowly being ceded away from the people to these giant billionaire oligarchs. What was your journey to that realization?
Before 2003, my life was relatively simple. I mean, I worked as an environmental health officer sort of all my life, but occasionally I'd escape to go into motor racing. And so I worked in Formula One. I worked for the Williams Formula One team when they were still winning championships. And I learned a lot through that. I learned graphic design, learned about business and marketing and all that kind of thing, and environmental health. I used to do track and trace from Heathrow Airport for real diseases, like people with cholera come in from India or something. And like we know they have it because they were ill on the plane and the doctor in the airport informs us. And then we go find them in Southall or wherever they are and make sure they're not going to work or they're not.
So you knew all these mechanisms already?
Yeah, well, because it's the Public Health Act is the thing that actually locked us down. It wasn't COVID legislation. Right. And I was using the Public Health Act the previous 30 years. So that was that. But it was like talking about media. What woke me up, I was completely oblivious. I didn't care about politics at all. Wow. No interest whatsoever in anything, just motor racing, trying to make money. That's all I was interested in. And then Tony Blair sent tanks to Heathrow Airport. And he had all these tanks around Heathrow Airport and soldiers with their heads stuck up outside the thing in the build-up to the Iraq war. And I just went, hang on, what's going on? They're trying to scare us. And that was from nowhere.
So that triggered you? That was a catalyst?
There was no processing. It wasn't like I was gradually wondering about the war. I just didn't care. And next second I go, they're trying to scare us.
Amazing.
And that was it. From that moment on, I was sort of awake. There was a gradual, discovered more and more stuff. But so technically, I thought, I was a left winger at that point, for about 10 years, and anti-war, all that stuff.
Still am.
Against
anti-war,
obviously, yeah, because you're anti-George Bush, all that sort of stuff. Although I accidentally didn't even notice it, but I called my son George W. Fleming, without even realizing it at the time. So then the big thing come 2018, 2019. I was big into climate for about 10 years at that point.
What do you mean you were big into climate?
Well,
the climate agenda.
Well, in 2009, I was having a conversation with my friend. And again, I wasn't even thinking about it. Even though I'm an environmental health officer, I have a degree in environmental science, I still just thought climate change was happening and whatever they were saying on the news was true, Yeah. And then my friend, we weren't having an argument or discussion. He just mentioned for some reason that carbon dioxide tracked, if you look at ice core samples, carbon dioxide tracked temperature by, 500 or 800 years or whatever. And whether it was true or not is irrelevant because that made me click. Just a little thing went click. And then I looked it up, that kind of thing. And then I just said, oh, it's all rubbish then, the climate isn't, caused by CO2, etc. And it might have helped that within a week, I had a meeting with people in motorsport who just spontaneously had a conversation about climate change being a load of rubbish. And I went, oh, I agree. Because that was my first time ever having a position on it. 2018, well, the first thing that happened was Extinction Rebellion appeared. And I remember Roger Harlem saying, oh, yeah, we're going to get people arrested. People are going to go to jail. And so I something in my head said, this is a sort of a step up. Because climate always seemed to be being like a can being kicked down the road, like for the last 30 years. It's like, okay, it's never going to happen really, is it? But when Hallam said that, and then I accidentally actually saw the first Extinction Rebellion protest in London. And then shortly after that, Greta Thunberg turns up, with her school strike thing. And then my kids start going off school on Fridays.
Did you know that the health of your pineal gland has a direct impact on how long you live? Also known as the third eye, the pineal gland is like the conductor of your body's hormone orchestra and plays a vital role in the secretion of melatonin, which regulates your circadian rhythms and sleep patterns. It also plays an essential role in brain protection. That's why it's so important that it functioned properly. Suboptimal pineal gland function can lead to chronic health issues such as sexual disorders, mood swings, depression, and many other challenging conditions. But the good news is there is a solution, and it comes in the form of the miracle molecules known as peptides. Peptides are short strings of amino acids, which are the building blocks of proteins. It's been discovered that 5% of short 2 amino acid chains, or dipeptides, are gene switches, and they fit perfectly into the DNA spiral to switch single genes that are there. Endolutin is a dietary supplement containing natural pineal gland peptides that can normalize the pineal gland operation. 30 million patient scientific studies proved they work. As a supporter of Eyes Wide Open, you can get a 5% discount on Endolutin and other peptides available from our sponsor, Profound Health. Click the link below or go to profoundhealth.com and use the code Eyes Wide Open. Invest in yourself, slow down the aging process, have more energy, and increase your lifespan today.
And so that was that. And then in November, the Democrats won the midterms. And Ocasio-Cortez appeared like days after. I remember thinking it was very suspicious. Just after she got elected, there was a video went viral of her dancing when she was a student, like just on a rooftop, just doing a little sort of private dance. It's a very simple thing. But it went viral, and some people said disparaging things about her. And that was then used as sort of a weapon to say, oh, you're terrible people, slagging off. What's wrong with a girl dancing? You know, you're nasty, you know, misogynists and whatever, or racists or anything. And that raised her profile up instantly. I don't care what she'd done before. I mean, technically she was a waitress, but literally don't know what else she did before. But she just got elected, and all of a sudden she was world famous. And then, next thing you know, like within another couple of weeks or whatever, she's publishing this Green New Deal.
Yeah, that's right.
And it was the first time we'd heard about this thing. And it was a ridiculous thing. It was like no flights ever again anywhere.
And everyone laughed at it, I remember, because it was so ridiculous.
And build a bridge to Europe across the Atlantic.
Yeah.
And it was so ridiculous that, like you said, you'd laugh at it. So that when they went, oh no, okay, well, because there was the Overton window, she moved the Overton, well, it wasn't, she was doing this at the Overton window. But by the time it settled, and they were saying, okay, no, well, massively reduced flights, retrofit every house with insulation, blah, blah. And that sounded okay compared to what she was talking about. Yeah. So she'd moved the Overton window. As far to the
extreme as she could, so that they'd settle on something a little less.
Yeah, which is like a Hegelian dialectic, you know. Yeah. And that was that. And then after Christmas, Theresa May basically signed us up to net zero. Yeah. Because she went on holiday to Italy, and the glacier she saw 10 years earlier was a bit shorter than it had been the last time she was there. And
Theresa, quick, you need some kind of crazy story to justify signing us up to net zero.
And I looked it up recently. That went through on the nod, but nobody, protested it at all.
Because no one really knows what it is or what it was or the implications that it had for, where we're at now. And that's right, is that we've had all of these crazy climate theories for a long time. And like you say, it's been kicked into the future. The future generations are going to be the ones that have to deal with the climate change, holes in the ozone layer. But now it's here. It's happening, isn't it? We're in the middle of the implementation of net zero and these attainable goals.
It was funny because when Tony Blair was leaving, like he was just handing over what was left of the government to Gordon Brown, I remember him saying, and don't worry about the climate, technology will fix it. And I just thought, oh yeah, sounds okay. Yeah. And this would have been after I woke up just about, but I didn't know many details yet. I realised then, like summer 2019, that, oh no, this is bad stuff. We have to do something. So I started registering, coming up with ideas. And that was when I came up with the idea about getting information out to the public. We really need to get information out to the public, which is what might be my thing ever since. But I still didn't know what to do because it was just me. And, it seems such a big thing. I didn't know how to get started. And then like lockdown starts, Boris Johnson tells us all to stay home and not go out.
What was your position on, because I'm a veteran of government psyops, and know one when I see one, and I can spot them from a mile off and smell them straight away. And I knew from day one it was it was a load of nonsense. And when did you also come to that realization?
Oh well, no, I knew all along. Well, at first. Well, there's two phases. I mean, I knew about swine flu from 2009, and I knew that was just rubbish, and they're always trying to hype things up for whatever reason. I mean, I know they're the bad guys, but it could just be for money, but who knows? So I knew that anything like this, I knew it was going to be rubbish anyway. But as soon as they locked us down, it was obviously a huge step further than they had before with swine flu and SARS, the original SARS.
It was like they were building up to that, new point.
And as soon as they locked us down, I just knew what it was going to be. I just knew it meant this was an acute thing. This was it was a really obviously, serious position you're putting people in, and it's going to be difficult and hard, and that it was basically like hitting us over the head with a hammer, and then knocking us to the floor. And when they stop hitting us, we'll get up, and then we'll just be happy to be in net zero, basically.
Yeah, I think the fly in the ointment was Putin going into Ukraine, because it kind of disrupted that narrative, because maybe that was what was meant to happen, is we were meant to go seamlessly from COVID into the net zero climate lockdowns, but all of a sudden they had to drop, one set of propaganda because, what happened in Ukraine kind of took everyone's eyes off the ball.
Yeah, although the thing is, you see, I don't think anything happens, in this world without the cabal's say so. And also, don't forget, if they wanted to make little of this, they'd have just ignored it. They'd just, if they had their own agenda for stuff at home, they could have just said, "That's none of our business. That's an internal matter." They could have still done whatever they wanted. So I don't know.
We'll talk about your new project now. But that's kind of the reason I asked that, because we come to this realization that the country is screwed. Everything is corrupt. The government is bought and paid for. The NHS is just totally corrupt to Big Pharma. The media are totally controlled by transnational corporations or oligarchs out of our view. And it seems the country is just being sold down the river, and we're losing more and more of our freedoms, and our rights are being roughshod. And it seems to be like, we use the word global cabal, but it actually really is. And I think at the center of that is the whole banking scam, because when you've got unlimited money, you can buy whoever you want pretty much. But the biggest problem is the fact that we have 650 MPs, overwhelming majority of whom would just do as they're told, and either due to the party political system itself being broken, and the fact that these people can be bought, and they are bought, and working against the interests of the people that they're meant to represent, as we've just seen with what's just happened over the last few years. They were all against us pretty much. Now, I know your new project is still gestating, but it's pretty ambitious. So tell us a little bit about, what your ideas are for solving these big meta problems that seem overwhelming in the face of it. And how would you go about fixing Britain?
Well, it's not just Britain, the world.
Yeah. But still, if we start at home, we can work from there.
Well, that's the whole plan. Well, like everything you just said in that little summary of what's wrong, all those points are, important, like bits of the puzzle. Like, you can't talk about the 650 MPs of the two-party system without looking at where they came from in the first place. I mean, there's so much to talk about, but okay, if I would like to do an experiment, but it'll probably never happen. But I'd like to sit down with maybe some sixth formers or something, or GCSE, older kids maybe, and just sit down in a room for 2 hours or something, or maybe a few, it could be a longer project, but just say, right, I give you 10 trillion pounds, starting from a white, sheet of paper. I'll give you 10 billion pounds. You come up with how you can take over the world, and see what they come up with. Just say you did that in 100
I think
schools.
someone asked ChatGPT that question, and it came up with this really detailed plan of how to take over the world.
Well, maybe. Yeah. Well, but, if you had 10 trillion pounds to start off with, that's a lot of money, obviously. And you could have a shopping list. You could just say, okay, well, let's buy up universities, buy up,
So if you had a blank check like the global cabal do have.
Yeah.
So if the roles were reversed, what would you do?
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. So I think people, I'm not saying this is what we do, but this is what the cabal are doing. So it's to prove the point that it can be done. And obviously history has shown us over thousands of years that there will always be people trying to do this, trying to take over the world that they know, the known world. They're always at it, So this is no different. So they're doing it now. Whatever the reason, I don't know their ultimate reason. I don't know who they are, I know probably some of the key players, maybe don't know some of them. I don't know exactly how they're working together. You can sort of guess that there seems to be a way that some of them are working together, but it's almost irrelevant as what they're doing. But the key point is that at some point, whoever they are, they're influencing our government. And that's where our problems start.
Yeah.
So that's where I believe the problem has to start.
So the point of attack is Westminster.
Because any other level, there's no mechanism to attack because you and I can't vote out the Bank
the
of
state
International...
has the monopoly on violence. So the state is able to use its executive power in order to enforce legislation that goes through Parliament. So if they want to send the police round to you to close your pub because you're open during COVID, they will send them down round, mob-handed, and they won't think twice about using violence against you to kick you out your property.
Yeah.
So that's why Parliament is important, because it has the monopoly on violence.
But it's like, at what stage can we stop this? But we can't get rid of the WHO, just you and me. You know, we
when
can't.
You say the WHO, you mean the World Health Organization?
We can't get rid. You and I can't get out of the UN.
No,
we can't do anything like that. It has to be our government that gets us out of these things.
Yeah,
and they're not. They're not doing their job, and so basically that's where we have to focus our efforts, is the government. Like the people who are in power. I've done a lot of research on this in the last few weeks, but like we always had monarchs in England and then Britain, and they were all powerful. And then we had the complicated period with Cromwell and stuff. But ever since Cromwell and the Restoration, things settled down into a sort of a two-party system where you had only wealthy men had the vote, and they had a two-party system. And it shows how complicated things were in those days. And the two parties were the Tories and the Whigs. And the only difference between the two was one thought the monarch should never be Catholic, and one thought it's okay if he's Catholic, even if we don't agree with it. We don't like Catholics, but he can be Catholic because that's what God has chosen. And that was the only difference between the two. And then the real power was still with the monarch, and the wealthy people, the wealthy classes. But they allowed the people to think they were in charge, so that the people who were voting for these two parties, and whoever was going to be in charge, Disraeli or somebody, they think they wouldn't fight the monarch anymore because they thought they were in control with these two parties. And then there was gradually pressure to have universal suffrage for all men and women as well. And so you can see, just before the men were given the vote, universal suffrage, you could see that they split the Liberal Party. So you had the Tories and the Whigs turned into the Liberal Party, and the Whigs, and they'd be it was a bit like the Tories and Labour now. It'd be one or the other every couple of elections. But then the Liberal vote basically the Liberals split and became like ineffectual, and then Labour suddenly appeared. There had been a Labour effort to get into power for years, but there was none of the poor people had votes, so it didn't happen. But then Labour sort of started to get a bit more popular, and then universal suffrage came in, and then that was it. Ever since then, it's been for 100 years we've had the Tories and the Labour two-party system. And because obviously it's like they didn't give us all the vote until they'd learned how to work the two-party system. And so it's just that left, right, and nothing happens. So basically, the two-party system has kept us in control ever since. And it, like you said, also like about bribery and stuff. So the two-party system ensures that
they can control the outcome.
Well, if both parties have roughly the same policies, then they win. And they can have little differences, like more rights for workers or less tax for rich people, but everybody gets net zero. It's the same thing, because that was the thing, because when Boris Johnson won the election on Brexit, net zero was in there, and Labour had net zero in their manifesto as well. Which
is the fundamental policy, which is the policy that will shape all other policies.
Yeah, so Brexit didn't matter to us, really. Net zero was the big thing. So they control that, and then so you got the two-party system is generally controlling the whole thing. But within that, all the MPs are selected in the first place, and you don't select someone who is going to be against the party, because Andrew Bridgen's side recently, 650 MPs, not one of them resigned all the way through COVID. Not one of them. They all thought, oh yeah, this is okay, no problem.
They had the protection of the state, they had the protection of the media, they were able to keep themselves distant from their constituents, so they were insulated from the criticism that they should face.
But it's like not one of them thought morally they should leave. I leave jobs all the time. I mean, if I had been an MP, I would have been out there straight away.
I think it's a really cushy number, isn't it? It's a high status position.
Well, that's why the European MPs, they're it's just a
total
trough.
gravy train.
Total gravy train. Not one of them wants to leave.
But I think you're right. I think what COVID did is expose who the real shills are, who the real grifters are, right? And a lot of them can be found in Westminster because they just all sat it out. And why weren't they fighting for the people? Because for them, party comes before their own people.
Yeah, well, completely. I mean, it goes to show completely. Not one of them could give a toss about any of this, but the people don't count. It proves they're not representing their people.
Exactly.
And that's basically what we have to do. So there's obviously, working backwards, we need to get rid of the party system in Parliament. And because
our system wasn't actually created to be a party political system anyway. It was that's only been added on later.
Yeah, and also America didn't have parties either.
Yeah, because the representative goes to represent the people from the constituency, not a party.
So the thing is, to actually be the government, you have to be a party. So, I mean, very, very roughly, our plan is to, ideally. So I'm going to talk about ideal scenarios here. The ideal scenario is we get a majority in government with independent candidates, although at first they'd be an independent party. So there'd be a party of independents. They get into power. Once in power, obviously have a majority, because we're talking ideal scenarios here. They would then repeal stuff, change stuff, change the system of, put proportional representation in. Even if, obviously, if this happens, we will have won by first past the post. But we will still put in proportional representation, ban parties at that level in Parliament. I mean, you can't stop later on in subsequent elections, if this all happened, the independents would break into factions. So you would have the freedom faction, to put a word in it. You'd have, like, Labour and Tories might have got working hard, and they'll have their independents in there, and the factions will have the policy suggested to them by think tanks. So you'd have a Labour think tank. So that would happen eventually down the line, but we could do a hell of a lot in the first Parliament to turn back. Because imagine day one of the new Parliament and the BBC is suddenly telling the truth. So, all the, I don't even know if...
You'd have to replace all of the, the shills and hacks there first.
Get Hugh Edwards in and he'd be telling the truth. And so you'd be pumping out the truth all the time, and the public will start thinking, okay, this is real. So if Labour and Tories eventually come back over maybe another couple of parliaments, and they're still lying, then the public would have got wise to it by then, hopefully. So that's the idea.
So replace Parliament with a coalition of independents, 650 MPs if possible.
Yeah, so have a majority in government, repeal stuff, make new laws, and basically, obviously, depoliticize the institutions, all that kind of thing. Cut off, the most important thing is to cut off influence from, like, lobbyists and international actors or anybody, basically. I mean, imagine the independent MP goes into, so if a representative of the local area, from there, not necessarily a showy person, and they go into Parliament like on a very thick elastic rope, so the slightest question about their behaviour and their
recall.
Straight back.
We don't have a recall system, do we?
We'd have all that. They can just get straight back into the recalled, like, if there's like a quorum in.
But it's revealing in itself, isn't it, that there isn't a mechanism for the people to recall their representatives to answer to the people.
Then the European, the EU built on that and perfected it.
Yeah.
I mean, the EU has got...
answerable to nobody. Well, nobody. They're paymasters.
There's absolutely nothing you can do about the EU. I mean, I can't believe people I know who remain, all they think about is, like, free movement. The shiny thing.
The holiday. So they can go on holiday with it. But they're not interested really in democracy for the people.
They're not even aware of it. No. Well, it was like me before Tony Blair sent tanks to Heathrow. That's what I look at it. I think about that.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny though, isn't it, that was your trigger point? That it was lying latent in you, in your character, and it was dormant, and it was just waiting to be triggered.
Yeah, you could never have predicted that, and that's why leaflets indoors I think are great, because you can never predict who's going to wake up.
Yeah, really good point. Really good point.
You can't walk up to a person and says, "I'm going to convert them now." I mean,
so okay then. We're going to get 650 new independent MPs elected into Parliament. What would be the tactical approach to make that happen? How would you overcome, the discrepancy between the existing political parties and all of the funding and experience they have with a coalition of independents? How do you make that happen?
Yeah, well, there's a number of things. I mean, obviously, so the existing parties have a lot of resources behind them, but you could say that we've got the most. We've got potentially.
Well, I think you've proved it on a small scale with Oxford, because Oxford was people power.
Yeah. I mean, it's basically that idea, really.
Yeah.
You see, I look at it as, okay, we won't. If as it's going to happen over the next few months, we certainly don't now. We will not have a budget for TV ads or anything like that. So that's nothing. It's going to have to be grassroots. It's going to have to be that sort of Oxford idea.
Yeah.
People just getting out there in the community, talking to people.
Hack the process.
Yeah. And the key thing is that it's just people talking to people they already know. So, I mean, if you work out roughly, so the most recent polling surveys from a week or two ago had Labour on about 42 and the Tories on about, I forget, like 20 or something, or 23 or 40.
So it's threatening a new Labour landslide.
Yeah, but they're the numbers of voting intent, like people just say what they'll vote. But in a real election, 35% of people don't vote. So the reality is, at the moment, if you had the figures in front of you of who's voting, 35% won't vote for anybody. About 28 will vote for Labour, about 18 will vote for Tory, and then like 10 Lib Dem, 6 Reform at the moment, 6 Green. It's small numbers. The biggest number is 35. Now that 35% of non-voters is...
I'm in that 35%.
Yeah, well, I was as well.
Yeah.
I never voted until Brexit.
Yeah.
First time, I voted a couple of times for show, just to show my kids that I vote, But I was just voting for some local independent. And I didn't even care whether... It's just the kids would see me ticking a box. So I literally never voted, ever. Because of that, because I knew it would make no difference. Yeah. Now, I know a percentage of people don't vote because, they couldn't care less. They mightn't even know there's an election on, there's no interest. But there's going to be, say, 50% of those, 18% maybe, of the electorate who don't vote because they're disenfranchised, like you and me, who would vote for somebody if they thought it would make a difference. And we have to stand up and say, this is it. We're going to make that difference. Yeah. Vote for us.
Well, with all of the alternative media, we've kind of got a bit of infrastructure in place to be able to disseminate that message.
Yeah, well,
that's going to be the hardest part, isn't it?
Well, that's the key part. Well, you see, the thing is, I wouldn't even think about doing this if I didn't think I had it all sorted out. So I think I've got the how, worked out. But yeah, so if you get a chunk of that 35%, you're halfway there, or more than halfway there, because you only have to take a little bit of the protest vote. So about 15% of the country vote Tory, whatever happens. You'll never change that. And about 15% vote Labour.
And everyone else is swinging in the middle.
You'll never change those 15s, but there's a 10 that swings from each to the other, depending, fed up with them, vote for them. And some will never vote. Some Labours will never vote Tory, so they'll vote Lib Dem. And some Tories will never vote Labour, so they vote Lib Dem. So you've got these protest votes. So you just get a bit of those two. And then you'll have the freedom vote that's out there, the people who vote for Reform or UKIP still. And
we would form part of the coalition of independents, I guess.
Yeah. So before you know it, if you get a chunk of those non-voters, you've got 27%.
See, you don't even need to be the majority, because you can wield a lot of influence as a part of a smaller coalition.
Well, that's later on if you don't win. But no, you can get first past the post. You can get 25%.
I get first past the post of 25%.
Yeah, and you could have 25% and Labour have 24%. That's not much of a move from their current 28%.
Yeah.
And they'll come down eventually. I mean, and Tories will come back up a bit.
But if you're going to take them from anyone right now, it's going to take them from the Tories, aren't you? That's where that's where the votes are up for grabs, really.
Yeah, but don't forget there's a 15% who won't vote for anyone else.
Yeah.
So we've got 3% to play with there. But I don't even want them. I want, say, the non-voters, the protesters, the people who are moving from Labour to Tories because they're always fed up with the current government. But some of them might come up to us.
You remember in the last election, it was unprecedented. You had the red wall that was defeated, which was people in Labour strongholds, Labour constituencies have always voted Labour, didn't take the protest vote, actually voted Tory for the first time and made those Tory, constituencies. So there is that portion of the electorate who will go to the extreme and vote for the Tory party, which you wouldn't.
Yeah, because it's like common sense.
Yeah.
And one of my sort of strap lines that I'm working on is I've done it, I might use it though, is common ground is common sense. So just to get the idea out there that, look, it's common sense. I mean, is it sensible to do X, Y, Z? I mean, the thing is, in the last couple of weeks, since the Uxbridge by-election, the Tories have started to roll back on ULEZ and the oil.
Even Tony Blair came out and said net zero might not be really our problem. I think it's China's problem, which is unprecedented for him because he's built a career on the back of net zero.
I think this is all part of
not ceding any more ground.
Well, it's like they've drawn a line. They said, okay, Labour, you can have the next election.
Yeah.
And now Tories, your new job is to start rolling back a bit on the net zero stuff so that basically to head off any grassroots party that might rise up like us.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons that we could be successful is because there'd be a grassroots rising against ULEZ and all that stuff, net zero. So if the Tories start to occupy that space, they know they're going to lose the election, but
it's a blocking move.
Yeah, they'll soak up those votes to stop someone like us. But we just have to get the word out there that it's common sense that it's going to happen anyway. Whoever's the power. Well, I mean, the next 4 years, if Labour get in, they're dead in the water. They need to vote for someone else.
There's been a little bit of a precedent about what you're talking about in Liverpool in the last local elections. Friend of mine, guest on the podcast, been on twice. Lawrence Kenwright. He's a hotelier in Liverpool, and he ran a campaign against Liverpool City Council, Labour City Council, for a long time for the fraud and corruption that is endemic in Liverpool City Council and has been exposed through various government reports. The mayor of Liverpool got arrested by the police and there's ongoing investigations, and it's undeniable the scale of fraud and corruption within Liverpool Labour City Council. So Lawrence Kenwright organised a coalition of independents called Liberate Liverpool, and they ran, in the local elections, but the Labour Party won by landslide, despite all of this evidence against them. Although the argument was made that the people didn't know about this evidence, that the fraud and corruption was actually still quite buried, and because the local newspaper, the Liverpool Echo, obviously was batting for the Labour Party and wasn't doing its job and telling the people the scale of fraud and corruption in the council, and was just there to propagate the message. Is they didn't win a seat, and they ran a campaign. It was pretty good, but I think they probably launched too late. I think that was probably the fundamental error they made. But they used all of the dirty tricks against the Liberate Liverpool candidates, who were all independents, the usual smears, racist, anti-Semite, bigots, whatever they could throw at the candidates, they would throw it at them. But it was almost like it was a bit. I know Liverpool is probably an exception because it is a Labour stronghold, but it was like, what do people have to see before they will, move away from this tribal politics, but these people who are clearly not representing them, they're clearly ripping them off, they're clearly about to put them in a 15-minute city. And I think that is what you'd have to overcome, is this, generational tribal loyalty to certain political parties.
Yeah, but as I said, that they're like the 15%, Labour 50%, who will never vote for anyone else. So there's no point trying them. That's why the no voters, the people who don't usually vote, are the big ones. And then, so
it's how you get them out to vote, isn't it? That's the key.
Yeah, well, that's so. The thing is, so okay, going back to one thing you mentioned about how to get there. So one thing that we don't have at the moment is unity. So I'm not saying we're all fighting with each other, but we're all fighting different fronts. So it's like a war, and our army is fighting on like 100 different fronts. I mean, I just sat down, did a very quick, low-hanging fruit of what we're doing at the moment. And you've got like ULEZ, CBDCs, cash, leave the WHO, no to NATO. Lockdowns, obviously, vaccine harms, vaccines, new vaccines for kids, everything. There's so many different things that is going on in the, quote, freedom movement, that we're on so many different fronts that no army would win a war.
Because you don't know where to attack, is it?
It's like, ants attacking an elephant.
Yeah.
They're not going to win because none of the bites are going to take down the elephant, are they? So it's like a cartoon where the ants get together and turn into hammers and hit the elephant on the head or something. But we're on different front. Now, obviously, the thing is, everybody, we've got lots of different organizations doing all these, running campaigns and stuff, and we need a common focus. Now, the thing is, people could say, oh, yeah, we all work together and stop doing their other stuff, and that's the way to control us and stop the fight. So, I'm not saying we want to centralize control of all the groups, but I'm just saying all the groups should give some of their resources and platform and time, if they can spare it, but hopefully try and make some space for it, to focus on a common goal. So I use D-Day and Brexit as examples. So D-Day, whatever you think about the World War II generally, but let's just say it was exactly as it was laid out to us. They wanted to get control of the continent of Europe again from the Axis forces. So they want to get a beachhold in Normandy to funnel stuff in from the UK in there and take over. So the first thing that they did was they had to get hold of a little bit of Normandy, and that was the Normandy landing, so D-Day. So there were competing ideas of what to do for that.
But they all agreed on that.
Well, they eventually, people didn't all agree on it, but they all agreed to do it.
Yeah.
And even when then the plan was being made to do that, D-Day, they were still arguing about it. And there was I forget his name now, but there was one guy who was in charge of holding it all together, and eventually it worked. So now that didn't stop the armies fighting in other theaters and stuff, but they were focused on that one. So it was a single action, so it was a single thing, and our single thing. So we're fighting on hundreds of different fronts at the moment. So we have to choose one thing to be the single thing that we all help on. And that has to be getting the public to tick a box, in their local constituency on election day. And that's it. So how do you do that? Well, we do it by, for instance, the people who do stand in the park on a Sunday morning and distribute the light and do the yellow borders, they all overlap. They're usually the same people. So in a way, we want those same people again to set up the local committees in each of the constituencies. So that would be that. And then every other group, whatever they do, I'm not choosing anybody here or picking on anybody, but just say, for instance, Us for Them.
Yeah.
They've got a new campaign, say, to stop, sexualization of children in school, say, for the curriculum. So, for instance, with their email they send out, they can target their, whatever it is they want to talk about. And then as one option underneath, a call to action for the public, they can say, and if you don't believe, if you want to do something about this, donate here or whatever, go to this website and vote for your local, coalition independent at the next election. That'll be a vote against, the sexualization of, children's curriculums, So voting for the independent MP will be a vote against CBDCs. It'll be a vote for cash. It'll be a vote. So it'll be all these groups will have, a solution to their problem will be this call to action for the public to vote for us. And so that's where we can get our unity, because it's not selfish. We're not saying we want something from you. It's saying this is going to help you. It's going to help your network, your people, your audience will benefit. It'll help them if this works, and it's a call to action for them, so it might engage them more. It's a simple call to action. That's one of the simple things. A simple task like D-Day, well, obviously wasn't simple. It was one thing to focus on, and a simple action like ticking a box. So that's it. And basically, and it turns into a national campaign, or like local. So every constituency, the local people there just like grows, gradually, and it's 1-to-1. And the thing of going back to how to focus on people, if we have enough people, on the ground in a constituency, hopefully we'd have somebody in every sort of extended family, and everybody will know who the non-voters are. Like, I don't know, your cousin will know you don't vote, and they'll say, why don't you vote? And say, oh, well, because X, Y, and Z. Well, do you know that, if you vote for the independents, that's, they're going to fix that or whatever. And that you have to do it because, it'll help make it happen. And for once, your vote actually does count and you can make a difference.
Well, I think we have to do something, and we need ideas, and it's great to hear your ideas and the fact that you're putting your time and your energy and your resources into this. What kind of time scale are you looking at? When's do you want to be able to do this for the next election?
Well, that's the trouble. You see, yes, basically, because Keir Starmer's, he's been advised by Tony Blair and Gordon Brown.
Well, it's going to be another Blair government, isn't it?
Well, Blair's putting in his net zero policy, and Gordon Brown is putting in his New Britain
I've seen it,
policy. Yeah. So, but New Britain, you see, what we're trying to do now is we're trying to take over control power of. Well, we're trying to get a majority in the House of Parliament and form a government, because we still can. Yeah. Although it's a big task and a bit crazy, it can be done. We could, in a year's time, we could be in power in the UK. But if Keir Starmer gets his way, that's impossible.
They're going to break it up.
And we will not be able to do that ever again. So I think this is our last chance. And the only thing is, if we don't get in next time, if we kick up enough stink, like we were talking about mandates and 50-minute cities, if we don't, so, obviously it's a big goal, but let's say we don't get in in a year's time, then we have to make sure New Britain doesn't happen in the next parliament. So we kick up a big stink and basically tell Keir Starmer, do not make that happen. And challenge all the MPs, don't vote for that. And basically get like 1,000 people turns up at every MP's constituency to say, don't do that.
I don't think enough people know about New Britain. We won't cover it now, but
that's it. Yeah, we have to make it the story. Yeah, because if that happens, we can never vote out. We can never vote out.
Gordon Brown is an absolute loon. He is some psychologically flawed individual. That guy.
Well, if you're, you look at Keir Starmer.
But he would never be the Prime Minister of Britain on merit.
No.
The only way that guy is able to even be considered for such a high status, prestigious role as that is because he's astroturfed in, is because he is simply Tony Blair's puppet, and he will, act out whatever needs to be done and whatever needs to be said. Otherwise, we wouldn't even be considered for such a role. And that's the problem, is that a vote for Starmer is a vote for Blair.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, that we have to get that message across. Yeah. But if they do get in, we have to stop this New Britain thing so that we can build on what we've got. Because that's the thing. You see, there's loads of ways of looking at this. You've heard about the white hats, but we know they don't exist. But I've been challenging people over the last couple of weeks. Nobody knows of any plan to stop. I mean, obviously we're all fighting on fronts on little issues, but it's like there's no actual plan to stop all this. Let's call it the cabal. There's no plan to take down the cabal. Who's doing it? I mean,
it's got to be the people, doesn't it? Really?
Well, it has to be. We have to do something, and it's so we need a step by step. We need something to focus on and say, right, we're going to do that, and we need to motivate people to unite to work on that point. And so that is basically, I've worked out a way to get all the freedom movement working on this point. So, like, as I said, obviously this is part of it, but to get the idea out there that we don't want to step on anyone's toes. We don't want to do anything. Because the thing is, when I started Together, I thought this is what I was doing. That's why I called it Together. When I started Covid-19 Assembly, that's what I was trying to do, because that's why I used the word assembly. I went to the Great Rising in June in Stroud, which is set up by the HARE group, the Holistic something. It used to be called the Hardwick Alliance for Real Ecology. Now they've changed to the HARE, the Holistic Alliance for Real Ecology. But they were trying to motivate people to do this as well. And I went along thinking it would work. Richard Vobes did a couple of pieces about it, but they didn't come up. They've no plan. So they got everybody in a room together again, just like Together. Someone said to me, "Good luck with your Together meeting," before I went. So it's like Together, but they didn't want to create a separate organisation. But they've no plan. So that was when I went, right, that's it. I'm just going to go ahead with my plan and come up with an actual plan and just get people to rally around it. And I think once it's up and running, it will start attracting people. Hopefully, a bit like a black hole, just draw people towards it. And in an ideal world, parties would start. I don't know. Heritage Reclaim. Maybe we'll start to say, okay, for the next Parliament, we'll just
throw our hand in.
Yeah, we won't put up our own candidates. Well, they will. They can be independents, and we'll just put our resources and effort into doing this. And I don't think that would ever happen with reform, but I'll ask them, And but if we all just coalesce around one goal, then something might start happening. But if there's nothing there to coalesce around, nothing will happen.
No, absolutely. You've got to seed it, haven't you? And then let the culture take over. But it's been great chatting to you. Really grateful that I got a chance to hear about this new project, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about it when you launch it. We're going to close the podcast now. We're coming towards the end of the time we've got. Where can people find you online, David?
Well, at the moment, if you go to notourfuture.org, you'll find the website. And
are you on any of the platforms?
Well, I'm on Twitter a bit, but I don't. We don't do much really. We just sort of promote stuff a bit. But Twitter, I forget. But if you search for Not Our Future, you'll find it. But it's not Our Future. I think it's not _our future. Okay. I think Not Our Future was a non-smoking campaign in Australia, I think.
Right, okay.
So,
Okay. I'll put those links in the description below. Just to finish, I'll ask you for your last word in a second, but it's, I think the most important policy of any new independent government, and one that should be done first before they've got a chance to stop you, is to revoke the charter of the Bank of England. Because, and it's when you find out, I've done quite a bit of research into it, but when you find out that the charter of the Bank of England, that primary legislation can't get rid of it, and the Crown can't get rid of it. So there has to be some investigation of how we revoke this monopoly license to print money at interest and charge the British people. Because from my view, there's only one policy, and it's economic, because all of the other policies are judged upon by how much budget they've got to spend. So I think if we change the current structure of the money supply so that the people have control over it, because how can you be a sovereign nation if you don't control your own money?
Yeah, well, that's absolutely one of the first things we do. Yeah.
Cool. So what final words have you got for people who are watching this and they've been inspired to take action?
Yeah, well, I mean, whatever level you're at, if you want to make a real change, and this, I hate the word change in politics because it's always being used by people who don't want change.
Yeah.
But a real change, and here I am using it. But if you're a member of one of the freedom movement groups, then you please get involved. I'll be in September. I'll be launching, and I'll be putting the call out. But just help. Use, as I said, use your platform to get across to your members, your network, whoever it is that you deal with, to get out there and vote, to get out there and volunteer, talk to people, talk to your friends and family who don't vote, get the message out there. So whether you're one of the groups, please help unite us all together. If you're just an individual, please get in touch. Look us up now, or look us up, when we launch, and volunteer, because we want volunteers to come and just go out there and talk to people. It's going to be all about talking. Talking to people you already know, and getting the word out. So that's it, really. It's I want it to be as simple as possible. So it'll be just ask people to vote for us and explain why if they don't know. And we'll be getting information that our volunteers can use. So the simple information that they can have little slideshows to show people and say, I know this is important to you, and look, this is what's really happening. And they go, oh. And we can make a change,
Fantastic. David Fleming, thanks for coming on Eyes Wide Open. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Lawrence.
Thanks for watching another episode of Eyes Wide Open. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget you can join our live Q&A with David on Sunday, 27th of August at 7 p.m. David will be taking questions about all of the topics discussed in the podcast and any others that come up. You'll need to be a member to access the Q&A, so become a subscriber of my website and join our community. Links are in the description. I'm Loz, and I'll see you next time.